Welcome to LockerBlogger.com. This is the 60, and I'm your host, Mike Bako. With the NCAA tournament just around the corner and the Big East tournament in full swing, who better to break it down for us than John Canchillian of WGTB, Georgetown Radio. John, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here.
Let's talk about their season this year. As you mentioned, they had a disappointing year last year, rebound this year inside the conference, winning 10 games. Somewhat of a surprise, but a nice, strong showing. They were in the top 10 for a good portion of the year. Towards the latter part of the year, some home losses to South Florida, an embarrassing loss, and then losing to West Virginia on the road. Gauge for me their season this year, how they compare to last season, and what their hopes are for the tournament.
I think this team has high hopes.
Their schedule is very hard. Their RPI in the top 5 this year certainly will help them with the selection committee determining their seeds, but they do need a good showing in this Big East tournament to get a legitimate seed in the NCAA tournament.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Bracketology on ESPN has them right now.
Which every year, and anyone that does their brackets, they always have the 1 or 2 that have the 12th seed beating the 5 seed, so they may fall into that category this year.
Yeah, but if they beat...
Is it tough, you think, for Georgetown and other teams in the Big East to constantly be beating up on each other week in and week out, game in, game out?
I think it makes...
This year, there are a lot of big-name coaches. Obviously, the matchup coming up with Syracuse against Georgetown, two of the storied names, John Thompson and Jim Boeheim. What's the feeling inside the Big East just in terms of how many teams are in the Big East now? We don't have those name coaches anymore where you just think of Georgetown, you think of John Thompson, you think of Syracuse, you think of Connecticut, but now you have a lot of teams and the vibe and the atmosphere of the Big East tournament, not what it used to be in the past with this expanding of the field and double byes and things like that where it's somewhat watered down.
I think it is, but I think that we have a lot of good coaches, even at the lower end.
Let's take a little bit of a longer view and take it from the Big East tournament to the NCAA tournament. Who are some of your sleeper teams, and who are some of the teams that you think are ranked high but not necessarily good tournament bets?
I think the non-good tournament bets that are ranked high.
Okay, so let's backtrack real quick. So you think Duke, Kansas, Kentucky?
Probably Syracuse.
Probably Syracuse. Guess that. Does that #1 seed depend on how well they do in the tournament, or do you think they already have it locked up and the selection committee sort of knows, okay, wait a minute, if they drop to Georgetown, that'll be 2 out of 3 that they beat them. Even if they beat Georgetown but lose to another team, do you think Syracuse already has that #1 seed locked up?
A lot of people have been talking about the unimportance of it.
And that's it for this edition of the 60. Thanks to John Canchillian for joining us from Georgetown Radio. I'm Mike Bako. This is LockerBlogger.com. Welcome to LockerBlogger.com. This is the 60, and I'm your host, Mike Bako. March Madness is here. What does that mean? That means the NCAA tournament. As everyone knows, everyone's filling out their brackets. We're joined today by the radio personalities from Syracuse, Seton Hall, and Pittsburgh. Let's go around the table and introduce yourself, guys. So, Syracuse, New York. Syracuse was not very highly touted going into this season. Neither was Syracuse or Pittsburgh, but somehow Syracuse, after a very disappointing early season loss to Lemoyne of all teams, has come back, not only gained a #1 ranking during the season, but really moving forward into the NCAA tournament. Very high hopes for Syracuse. A larger view of the entire season. As we mentioned, Syracuse started off the season with that horrible loss, but they've had a lot of great games this year, beating Georgetown twice during the regular season. Rank for me how you think the teams going into the season fared compared to their preseason estimations.
Well, you mentioned Syracuse. They were 6th in the coaches'
Now,
poll.
who do you think were the biggest disappointments in the season? We're talking about teams that exceeded expectations. Who do you think never lived up to them?
I would have to go Georgetown, and they were definitely...
With Georgetown, you were mentioning that we have Monroe coming back and a great pedigree with John Thompson III. What do you think their chances are? And, well, actually, let's break down their season. Very highly rated. They had that great win against Duke when Obama was at courtside, and they had a lot of momentum. And then sort of going into the second half of the season, not so much. How do you rank them going into the tournament?
Well, Georgetown's been a great team all year long.
And you see it firsthand every day. I mean, Syracuse has the player of the year, but they also have a bench that could almost act as starters. They're going 7 deep, and those are 7 guys that can start not only on Syracuse, but pretty much any other team in the conference and in the nation.
Oh, no doubt about it. Big East 6th man of the year, and Chris.
We're talking about coaches, and you just mentioned Norm Roberts, very much on the hot seat, but there are a lot of big-name coaches in the Big East. Who do you think really distinguishes themselves with their team, taking what they are known for as being, big-name coach, but then team with not as much talent? Do you think that, obviously, someone like Jamie Dixon you were speaking about before, I think Dixon in his tenure as coach, is almost close to being a record setter in terms of the most wins in his first 7 or 8 seasons as a coach. So he's obviously someone that elevates the play of his team.
Yeah, he is. You know, whenever Ben Howland was here, he really started this.
So you like Dixon. I think there's going to be a little bit of
Well,
disagreement
you know what?
at the
Listen,
far end there.
don't get me wrong. Jamie Dixon has done.
All right, so let's just go around the table real quickly. Who do you think are the top seeds going into the tournament? Who are the 3 that you really like? And give me one sleeper who you think may just come out of nowhere.
I really think, you know, we talked about it before, Syracuse.
So you like Ohio State, a lot of that built around Evan Turner. How important do you think it is to have that one guy that you could just ride the back of, that, you know, proverbial Danny Manning story where he just Kansas rides him all the way to the championship? Obviously, Ohio State could do that with Turner, but how important do you think that is just in an overall sense of the tournament?
Oh, unbelievable. I mean, you guys watch Kentucky.
So wrapping up this year, let's take a look to next season. Seton Hall, we're not even sure which players are coming back or what the situation is there, but obviously with Syracuse and Jim Boeheim and Dixon in Pittsburgh, give me a few thoughts on next season's teams.
You know, I'll be honest with you.
How much in college basketball is actually the players versus the coaches? We're talking about young guys here. We're talking about some guys that are 18, 19 years old. We're talking more about coaches needing to get more production and performance out of these guys, or are we laying the blame all on the players?
I think it's definitely a little bit of both.
Let's go around real quickly. Give me your top moment from this year in the entire Big East play.
Wow, top moment. I mean, there's been so many, but I got to say.
The radio and personality voices from Pittsburgh, Seton Hall, and Syracuse, thanks for joining us. March Madness is here. This has been the 60 on LockerBlogger.com. I'm Mike Bako.